I'm Leslie Wharton. I am co-chair of Elders Climate Action. I am thrilled to have Jill Kubit here today. She has really been a leader in helping us find our voices and look down the line into the future of climate change and relate to it. She is the founder, co-founder, and director of DearTomorrow, which is a digital storytelling and archive project that's the purpose of which is to make climate change personal. It's not something happening 10, 20, 30 years from now. And the work she's been doing, and you will be hearing from her, has been recognized by a number of organizations. She's done a TED Talk. She got 2017 GRIST 50. The MIT Climate Collab has recognized her work in 2016, Vox.com, and even Public Radio International. Her focus is on climate change leadership development and coalition building and public awareness. And she is working on using narratives and digital platforms and public art to help engage and inspire people to act. One of the things about climate change is it's abstract, it's distant, it's hard to relate to, and her work, formed, I'm sure, by her study of public administration at the Harvard Kennedy School, is really taking a leap forward in getting engagement. So I think right now, maybe, Jill, I should turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a very nice introduction. So hello, everyone. I'm Jill Kubit, and as Leslie said, I'm the co-founder and director of the DearTomorrow project. DearTomorrow is a 2.5-year-old project that was founded while I was in graduate school, and I've been working on it since pretty much since June of 2015 to build this platform that you mentioned, where people can share stories about why they care about climate change. So in this presentation, I'm going to go through, I'm basically going to tell you a little bit about the project, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story of how I came to this work. And then I'm going to talk about why climate change communications is really important and why it's important for you to tell your own story. And then I'm going to read some of the excerpts from the collection. And we're going to talk towards the end about the partnership that we're engaging with elders. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and then hopefully at the end of what will probably be 15 to 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, we'll be able to have a really great conversation, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. Start with my screen share. Okay. So the idea of DearTomorrow is 3 parts. First, we want to provide people a lens to think more deeply about climate change. And so we ask people to look into the future and imagine somebody that they love currently. That could be your child or your grandchild. That if you're young, people who are young, that might be yourself in the future. It could also be a niece or nephew. And we want you to think about the person living in the year 2050. And they are asking you today what you did to make sure that they had a safe and secure future. And what you're doing now is writing down that story. You're telling them how you think about climate change, what actions you're taking, and really what you're committing to do moving forward. You're also providing them kind of a vision for what the world could look like if we were to address climate change. And so we feel that the process of thinking about somebody that you love and thinking about it through this lens of parental responsibility and family helps people to think about climate change in a much more personal way. Then we want people not just to kind of write it down and close it up and turn it into an archive, something that's stored away. We want people to actually share those stories. So when you submit a letter or a photo or video on Dear Tomorrow, we're actually asking people to then share those stories with the people around them, because we know that you are the most important advocate for climate change, and to the people that are in your life. So, some people are swayed by celebrities or by politicians, but most people are really influenced by their neighbors and their friends and their family members. So we want you to share the stories. And then what we do, we're the curator and we're the main hub. We then amplify those stories in a whole bunch of different ways, through social media, through media, through arts projects, in order to create more narrative stories about people taking action on climate change. So this came about after working on climate change since around 2006. I've been, from 2006 to 2013, I spent a lot of time working in the labor movement, thinking about how a transition to renewable energy or a low carbon economy would impact people and communities and workers. And I've done a lot of training on, bringing people together in a room or doing education and leadership development. And my experience through this kind of first period of time, this 8 years of working on climate change, was that when people would give presentations and when people were talking about climate change, we used a lot of scientific fact and data. And we know my experience, and that we know from practices in climate change communications, that only sways small numbers of people. And that most people, and this has played out over the last year and through the elections, that most people they don't change their mind because they've read information or data. They change their mind because they are hurt. They hear something that they can relate to, and it relates to their existing values. And so they can understand it in a way that's much deeper, much more emotional. So I had worked on climate change. I had organized events and done a lot of trainings, and a lot of the material had always kind of been up in people's heads, and the arguments that people use around why we must transition to renewable energy, they've all really been rational arguments. And it wasn't until I'd been working in the field and I actually had my own child that I really started to think about what was his life going to look like. And what would these years that exist on paper, like 2050 and 2030, what kind of milestones would that be in his life? And that shift of thinking about not just my own life, but thinking about the life that I was leaving or going to create for my child, made me think about climate change in a much more kind of immediate way. And definitely in a much more emotional way. And I found it extremely kind of powerful to think about, him coming to me and saying, saying like, what did you do when you learned about climate change? And instead of me saying like, I'm sorry, like we kind of messed up, I'm able to actually envision like what a world could actually look like. And then I'm actually able to make a commitment and put those pieces in place. And so, this experience of having a child while I was doing all this climate change work and meeting my co-founder, Trisha Shrum, who's a behavioral scientist, an environmental economist, she had told me that she wrote a letter to her own daughter to open in the future. And I just thought, we came together and thought, if we could get people to kind of go through this kind of emotional journey of really thinking about climate change in a much more immediate way, and in relation to somebody that we love, could we, change minds? Could we begin to shift the story? And so we co-founded Dear Tomorrow in 2015. So I've touched on this a little bit, but I think it's important to note a little bit about, how climate change has been communicated in the past. And, often, and, the most common image that we see on climate change is that we see an image of polar bears or of melting ice. Or, we've we've seen even more and more of the apocalyptic stories. I'm sure some of you read Davis Wallace Wells' piece this summer, about the uninhabitable Earth. So we see those narratives. We also see, as I touched upon, a lot of scientific data and fact, and we know that these kind of images and these messages actually don't work that well on engaging the public and inspiring people to take more long-term action. So we designed Dear Tomorrow to, using what we know about climate change communications and behavioral science. And so we're basically start where people are, start with their existing values. And we know that the value of legacy and of parental engagement is very, very powerful. And when we know it can cut across political, social lines in a way that sometimes talking about it in a much more political way or a much more like fearful, apocalyptic way doesn't quite work. Then we have this process of taking some time for people to reflect, write down your thoughts, and then share them publicly. And we know that when people actually write down their actions and they share them, they're more likely to make that commitment and follow through. The third thing that we think a lot about is that people are their own best messengers. And so we need to create a whole diversity of stories and of voices of people using their own language and telling their own stories so that other people in your lives can relate to those stories. And the fourth one is that sometimes we know that the issue is overwhelming, and that it's important for people to feel like, whoops, did it go out? Sorry. It's important for people to feel, let me fix this, for people to feel connected to actions of other people. And so it's really important, and I know that, that Elders thinks about this. It's important for people to do things together and to do things collectively and feel like part of a community. And so we wanted to provide a platform so people could feel part of a larger community and could see what other people are saying and doing. This is a really important graph. Can everyone see all of it? I think, okay, I need to move that over. Okay. So if you're not familiar with Tony Leisewitz's work at Yale, it's really important work on climate change communications. And they've done a lot of studies around, how people think about climate change. And one thing that I would highly recommend is the document and information called The Six Americas. And this basically looks at how different people think about climate change. And a lot of our strategy is actually built off of really understanding this and then understanding how we can be impactful. And I think sometimes I get a lot of questions from activists that say like, hey, like, I already get this. Like, I don't necessarily like need to write a commitment and make a commitment because I'm already doing stuff. But I think it's really important for people who are the most concerned, the most alarmed, to really share their ideas with people around them. And so I just want to point out that people are basically in the United States are on a scale from alarmed to dismissive. But the alarmed and concerned category is more than 50% of the general population. And these are numbers back in 2016, so I'm actually pretty positive it's probably higher than this. So 52% of people are alarmed or concerned about climate change. However, there's also another important data point, which is that only 1 in 5 people hear about climate change from somebody that they actually know, like on a monthly basis. So that means that the people that are alarmed and concerned are not actually articulating that alarm and concern because climate change is overwhelming. It's considered to be a polarized issue. It's a difficult issue. And so what we're trying to do is to provide a space for people to actually talk about climate change in a way that other people can relate. Okay. I'm going to move this.
Maybe forward arrow?
Okay. Yeah. No, I just wanted to move it so I can click at the bottom. It says that data on that only 19%, 1 in 5 people
Okay.
hear somebody else that they know talking about climate change. No, it's not working. Okay. Now I'm going to read. A lot of people want to know. So my last point that I was trying to get at is it's really important to tell your story and to share in a personal and relevant way why this issue is so important to you. But I'm going to spend the next couple minutes just reading some quotes because everybody always wants to know, well, you know, what do people write about and what's in the letters. So this first, let me try and move this. This first letter is from Joylette Portlock, and she writes to her 2 sons. She says, because it's an act of love to you and everyone who comes after this current generation. It is recognizing your rights and hopes and value as just as important as my own. I really could not live with myself if I let an act of injustice as big as leaving you in an unlivable climate and didn't do everything I could possibly do to stop it. So love is kind of the first overarching theme that runs through many, many of the letters. I'm trying to move it forward. Okay. Another theme that we get a lot is people talking about the impacts of climate change, and those can be impacts that are really big, and they can also be impacts that are really small. And I wanted to read one example of each. So there's a woman, Helen Nelling, writes to her 2 grandchildren. She writes about kind of the small things that she's noticing in her community. And she says, change has been occurring. We've noticed it in the little things. Armadillos have moved up to Missouri as southern states have gotten hotter. Birds that used to leave Missouri in the winter for warmer climates are now staying. And then she goes on to talk about, of course, she sees the bigger things like diminished ice caps and destroyed coral reefs and erosion of beaches. And so we get these kind of, sometimes, you know, if you haven't experienced like, extreme weather, you haven't experienced anything big, it's also really important to, if you can, to kind of document these little things. I think it's a really important idea around, the places that we love and the things that we do, the experiences, things we want to pass down, or the little changes that we see in our community, that we start to say like these things are actually happening now. There's another letter or quote I wanted to read, was from a student in Florida, and this comes in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. And she says, Hurricane Irma, which swept through our Florida town on September 10th, 2017, our tiny apartment lost power for 8 days. So many things that I took for granted, lights, air conditioning, my phone, hot meals, the internet, were gone. And now, less than a week after our electricity returned, I was taking them for granted again. Another thing that people talk about are the actions, and I alluded to this kind of throughout the presentation. This is from Claire Courtwright to her 2 children. She says, I don't know if my efforts on climate can truly impact the trajectory of carbon emissions over the next century, but I want you both to know that every letter I have ever written, every meeting I attended, every post I made to influence others, every item I reused, every luxury I didn't buy, every arrest I will subject myself to, these are all the point. I work on climate because I love you. So I'm going to read one more towards the end, but before that, and I'm going to have Grady offer up an opportunity for Grady to share a little bit from his letter. But I'm going to move on to participate. Before that, I forgot you know, as people are thinking about what they want to write and what they what stories they want to tell, I want to just make it clear that people talk about so many different things, and so I wanted to just provide you kind of a glimpse of some of the things that have themes that have emerged in the letters, and the last thing I would say about this is that I think that the kind of the most important or the strongest voices are able to kind of mix a whole bunch of different ideas. And, in the climate change communication space, there's this huge debate right now on, do you talk about fear or do you just provide hope and action? And I have a strong belief that, people are more complex than that, and that we can hold these different ideas kind of at the same time. And so the letters that I find, that are really, really moving, are able to go from kind of the urgency of climate change and, what their fears are to, what their hopes might be and what the future could look like. And then, end on what actions that they're already taking and that they're prepared to take in order to kind of make that vision happen. And so I just, wanted to give you a sense of all of the different kind of ideas and more that can happen through this project. I'm going to pass it over to Jen to talk about the partnership.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's hard not to get choked up listening to some of those excerpts that you just shared with us. We're really excited at Elders Climate Action to have the opportunity to partner with Dear Tomorrow on this project. And so we are getting ready. For some of you that don't know, we are about to roll out a new website at Elders Climate Action, which has been a very exciting process for us. And we're hoping to go live with the new website on February 1st. We'll be letting you all know. But one of the things that you'll find on the new website will be a portal or a page that you will be able to upload your story. We are partnering with Dear Tomorrow to help reach the elders, to help really build momentum in the elder community to participate in this project and leave their letter to the future. So we'll have a link on our website. We'll have a form that you can upload your story to. You can include pictures with your story, things like that, in the very near future. So watch out for the February newsletter. We will give you instructions on how to participate with the project in the February newsletter, or check back on the Elders Climate Action website after the 1st of February, and you should be able to find it. And it's going to be a really exciting opportunity for us to collaborate and share stories amongst both organizations. So your stories will be shared by Elders Climate Action as well as Dear Tomorrow, and will be kept in perpetuity, hopefully.
Yeah, I also want to encourage people on the call to submit a photo with your letter if you can. One thing that you may have seen either on our Facebook page, or it may have been in some of the letters or some of the photos that I shared, is that we do photo overlays, and we do include photos, and we find, we do Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and Medium, and we find that if there's photos involved, people are more likely to kind of look at them. And I think, when you're writing something personal, to someone, and you're basically sharing it, if you have a picture of like you and your grandkids, then like some of your relatives who may not be interested in talking about climate change may click on it to find out what is it, what are you talking about. So I think it can be really powerful to include an image. That said, that image there's lots of different kinds of images that people share. It could be a picture of yourself. It could be a picture of your family or loved ones. It could be a place where you live, a place that you love. It could be an experience or memory that you want to pass down. It's really open to kind of what you think kind of goes best with the theme of your letter and what you want to leave in the archive. So I'm just going to end on this quick last quote, and then we can kind of move in to Q&A, and we'll call on Grady to share. But it was a photo that was submitted by John Friedrich, and he wrote a really beautiful letter. And he says in the letter, part of it, he says, "When I see other dads and moms with their kids, I know they're feeling something similar. From San Francisco to Syria, Indianapolis to Iraq, the love that we parents have for our kids is universal. I've imagined from your first moments about how the collective power of love in the hearts of parents and grandparents could be harnessed to change the world." So that's the end of my presentation.
Oh, that was beautiful.
That was beautiful. Yes. Now, how do we want to proceed at this point? Grady, were you going to read something now, or should we allow some discussion beforehand? How would you like to proceed?
I leave that to Jill and you.
So since I read a lot, so why don't I take some questions, and then we can, then I can ask Grady a question, and then he can share.
So for questions, Jen, do we want to unmute or go back to the full screen where we
Let's go back to full screen where we can see the people on the call, or the people that are with us on video, see what questions we have there, and then we'll go to the phones after that.
Okay.
So if you have a question and you're on video, you can just raise your hand and we will call on you.
And the chat box, I don't, if you're on the phone, I guess you don't have that, but just start speaking.
If you're on video and you want to raise your hand, we can start with you for a question. Nobody has questions? Oh, Margot.
Yeah, I'm working with a group of people in my community to work with the high school and the schools on how they're teaching climate change, and we might have an opportunity to participate with them on an Earth Day program. And I'm wondering if the Dear Tomorrow project has, if you have any suggestions about a good way to do that with a group of kids in a high school setting.
Do I unmute? Okay. That's a great question. So I tailored this presentation around parents and grandparents just because of the audience, but we've had a number of letters submitted by young people. We've had partnerships with several universities, and we've even had 8th grade middle school students do the project. And kind of the only real change in the framing is for the person to imagine themselves living in the future. So they can imagine a loved one, but they could also think of their future self. And we find that that's really powerful, because somebody today who is, in high school is going to be, if they're 18 today, they'll be 50 in the year 2050. And so they will be in kind of the height of their life and their career, and where they may or may not have a family. But I think it's interesting for young people to really think about all of these changes that need to happen, that are definitely going to happen in their lifetime.
And they write it on your website, or they upload it to your website?
Yeah, so to answer the more, the questions around how it works. So any person can come to our website, which is DearTomorrow.org, and can submit a letter, a video, or a photo commitment. And I've had a number of teachers who have done this as a classroom assignment. So if you have somebody specific in mind, they can get in touch with me. But they could also just do it without any connection to us. And they can, once the letters are submitted, and they're approved. They're on the site, and then they can use them however they want.
And Margot, they'll be able to upload them through our site, through the link on our site as well.
Right. Thank you.
Other questions for those people that we can see on screen? Oh, let's see, Leslie.
Yeah, this question may not be very well phrased, but I mean, I think you make an incredibly important, powerful point that the way people can connect with climate change is through the personal, the intimate, the world they know, the people they care about. The abstract science has very little moving force. And have you gotten feedback maybe from some people who've done letters or videos on your website about the impact of participating in this has had on them and their families or friends?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's something we're working on, which is we're really trying to understand what the impact is of the project. And in 2018, we're going to be doing a series of surveys, participant surveys. But we do have a lot of anecdotal, so we don't have the this increased people's perceptions by this percent people who have participated. But we do have a lot of anecdotal evidence from people. Just last week, I had somebody who posted their letter on their Facebook feed, and then I got to read because this person who I didn't know before has since friended me, and I got to read all of the comments and everything. And my favorite comment, I'm going to just read it to you because I think it's really powerful. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Where is it? Yeah. So my favorite comment is from this is a young dad who has who writes to his 6-week-old, and his mom writes to him, or in-law, I'm not sure, says, "I read your letter more than 10 times when you wrote it. Your words have had a profound impact on me." Well, it's his mother, "not only as a mother to you, but also as Nana to our sweet Faison. I can't read it again now because I'm in the office and will cry again. I'm glad your words resonated with so many others and will reach even further. You will affect change. I know this. I love you dearly." And so we get a lot of that from people, is that someone in their life who, it's not everyone in their life, but someone in their life who they've never had these conversations with before. They never sat down with them, their boss or their neighbor. They kind of use this as a way to introduce the project. So we've had feedback like that. We've also had feedback where people have emailed me saying they retrofitted their house, they put solar panels on their house, and that's all unsolicited. So that's super fun as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jill, or questions about the partnership project between Elders Climate Action and Dear Tomorrow? How you can be involved? How you can get others involved? We really hope that you will take the opportunity to join the project and write a letter, but also to take your letter and, as Jill was saying, share it on social media, share it with family and friends, put it out there to the world. Don't just put it under the mattress hoping someone will find it in 2050.
Well, and this is really how social movements are built. It's the networking, it's the sharing with people you know. I mean, dealing with the embedded infrastructure of our corporate world, our international agreements and things like that, there's an awful lot of resistance out there that's just structural. And it's by feeling and sharing and networking that we build a very powerful movement of voters, of people who care, of people who respond to things that are happening. And there's really no other way, given what we're up against, than this kind of action of reaching out, embracing, and passing it along.
Yeah, so I'll just add to that. I mean, I think a lot of times people say, they say, oh, well, like I write down my ideas, or I share my story, but like, what's the real action? But I think that, and I've been talking to a lot of like some of the best researchers and thinkers in the field, and I think there is this kind of sense now that talking about climate change in itself is probably the most important thing that you could actually do. And I think what we're trying to do is show that there's value to that, and then providing people kind of a way to do it in a way that's not threatening as other ways that people have traditionally been talking about climate change. So I just want to emphasize what a powerful action it is to actually sit down and have a conversation with someone, or to share your story, and to inspire somebody else to take action, and really to show them why you care so much about this issue.
And let me throw something in there from a different perspective. I'm an attorney, but I serve as a mediator in disputes. And one of the things we hear so often is, climate change, people have different attitudes, and, you start trying to talk to somebody about climate change and they're going to yeah, shut up, I don't want to hear about this. One of the lovely things about composing a letter, about laying bare your soul, your concerns, whatever your focus is in that letter, but it's a letter thought out, it's a letter that is your reflection. Well, when somebody reads that letter, they're not in a face-to-face, I've got to react right away. They have a chance to read that letter and absorb it. And even if their reaction initially, I don't agree with that, there's the distance between reading the letter and perhaps seeing you the next time or conversing with you. And that can build a lot of reflection and consciousness, so that when you do have face-to-face conversation, it doesn't start as antagonistic. There's an understanding, there's an empathy, even if there's not a full agreement. I'm not articulating this very well, but I think there's a very important part of your having invested the time and energy and thought to craft this letter that helps people who might be resistant or might have trouble to actually be able to absorb what you're saying and not just have the negative.
Jill, I wonder if anybody has notified you if they have sent these letters to elected officials or to their members of Congress or anything of that nature, and if they've let you know that.
Yeah, we've had organizations who have basically taken their collection and they've used them in a bunch of different ways, and one of them was to read them during I forget if it was like one of the hearings of somebody, but there was they read it on the in the halls of Congress. We've also had people who have had their pastor read it during a sermon. We've had people submit it to like a newsletter, or we've had a number of different ways that people have kind of taken the stories and used them. We've turned them into videos. We've had somebody read a letter during a theater production. So there's I don't have all of the examples with me, but there's just kind of this unlimited amount of different things that you could do to continually use the material, whether it's using the whole thing or it's using a quote for an art piece or for an article. They can be recycled and reused so many different ways.
Wow. Is there anyone on the phone who has a question or anything you would like to share at this point? Just speak up.
Everybody on the phone has been unmuted now.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello. Hi, this is Helen Mell in Sonoma. I just want to be clear about how this project works. I write a letter to my grandchildren and my children, so I write like 5 letters, and then I submit it to Dear Tomorrow, or do I submit it to Elders Climate Action?
You'll submit through Elders Climate Action. We'll send you in the newsletter, and early in February we'll send you information on how to do that. And we'll be collecting those ongoing throughout the spring probably. And yeah, you'll just be able to go to the Elders Climate Action website after February 1st, and you'll find the link there, or look for it in the newsletter. And you'll be able to upload it there and upload your photographs with it as well.
Okay, well, I just want to say it's a brilliant idea. I'm so grateful to hear about it. It's very inspiring.
Thank you. So I just want to add that you don't need to write a letter to every person individually. You can just include all of their names and you could write one to your children and write them to your grandchildren collectively. Because it is a very deep kind of reflection process, and sometimes it's really easy for people, but sometimes it takes some time and some thought and and it can be an emotional experience for people. So I don't want to overwhelm you with feeling like you have to do this for everyone.
Okay. And then the other question is, after I've done that, then I post it on Facebook or I email it to different friends. Was your concept?
Yeah, so yours will be posted on both Elders Network's website, and it will be on the Dear Tomorrow website. And it will be part of our database, which becomes part of our long-term archive. From there, from our website, I don't know how Elders is working, but from our website, you can easily share it on Facebook, or you can email me, and I'll be sending. Everyone who does it, I send them a link to their letter, and then you can email that around, or you can share it on social media. You can send it to the intended recipients.
Okay, thank you. That's clear.
Any other questions on the phone? Okay, I think Margot has a question. And Margot, I also wonder if you might add, I know you've already written at least a first draft of a letter, and I wonder if you might want to share a little bit about your process, just even sitting down to write it and kind of your head.
First, I have a couple of questions, because I realize I've been a little confused. So when I first heard about it, I heard it was like a time capsule. Mm-hmm. And I thought, how can it be a time capsule? We have no idea how we will be communicating and what the technology will be by 2050. I mean, you think about changes in the last 30 years, it's beyond anything we would have imagined. So, so I hear that I write the letter as if I'm writing it to my grandchildren in the year they're going to read it in the year 2050 when they're in their 30s and I upload it and share it with Dear Tomorrow and ECA now. But it strikes me that it would be important also for me to have a written version of it that somehow gets passed down to them when they're older. Mm-hmm. And I wrote it to them as if they were looking back on what was happening when I was writing it. And so I'm just a little confused about all of that.
Okay, this is a great question. So it is a time capsule, and it is also a living project right now, because we didn't want to create a time capsule that you would do self-reflection, and you would write it down. It would be buried for a certain number of years, and then it would come back in the future. We feel like the narrative piece is really, really important to share now. So let me separate these two things out. One part is the archive, which we are basically when we're going to run the project for a certain number of years, and then we're going to close it down, and we will bring it back. Right now, the plan is to bring it back in the year 2030 and the year 2050. And at that point, our plan is to make it publicly available for people. It may be, my dream is it will be in a major art institution, or it would be in the Smithsonian. And so it would be reshared. And we will have an archivist who is working on how do you transition data over time, because we know that the way the website is now will be like, people will be like, what is that? And so we do know the kinds of questions we're asking is like, how do you transition data over time and migrate the data so that we know that it will exist, it can exist and be brought back in the future. I wish I had more clarity on that, but part of it is for us is like, we're trying to build that vision and find an institutional partner. The second piece is the sharing now. And so it's a living project that exists online now for at least until 2020, where people can write and share stories and talk about why they care about climate change. So it is both of those things in the grand vision of the project.
And in addition, access the link to their shared story. Is that correct? So their link will be at least available for their individual story will be available through 2020.
The individual link will be available as long as a project is live on a website. And then at some point it will be closed down, and we will either print all of them and have them, we will save them in a way that they will be available and we'll be able to bring them back in the future.
But Margot, to your question, I think maybe that adding it to your will or adding it to your safety or your security box or all of those, to the places where people will find it if you're not here to give it to them in 2050. So. Yeah,
we've been talking about potentially like you just said, like getting people to sending them a really nice copy and then getting them to print it out and say for 2050 only, and have people put it with their important documents that they would pass down. But we haven't done that part yet.
Wow. Well, we're moving along in time. Maybe David has a question.
Yes, David, I'm in Arlington, Virginia, Jill. I understand that ECA will link to your site. Will there be something on your site that might lead people to ECA who are looking to act as elders?
So when the letter comes in, you're right, it will be both on the ECA and the Dear Tomorrow site. And then we list all of our partners on our site. And then I think we need to discuss more, Jen, about if there would be, a separate page so that people can, on our site that says this is the ECA campaign. And, we're open to doing that.
I hope you'll do that.
Great. Well, we'll talk about that further then, Jill, after the call. I think Sarah, did you have a question, Sarah?
Well, I just wondered what you thought the world would be like in 2050, or whether we should address that at all, or just talk about our impressions now.
Certainly people do talk about what they think the world in 2050 will look like. There's a lot of different ways. Some people have a very apocalyptic vision of what it will look like. Some people have a completely different set of values of things, that the way things will be structured, not just from a technological perspective, but also, how people interact and communicate, and that, the things that potentially could be valued in the future. So it's a very different, there's a huge spectrum in terms of how people think about the year 2050. You don't have to project that. I think that's a difficult thing for some people to kind of imagine. So, you can talk about what you're doing now, how much you love them, what are things in your life you want to preserve for them. There's so many things you can talk about. And if you go back through the slide where I said kind of all the different things that people talk about that might help you kind of think about what you would like to leave. There's no prescription.
Margot.
It just occurred to me, I'm going to rewrite what I had written before, which I wrote when I was under the influence of the flu. But it just makes me think about Joanna Macy's work and her term, that we are living in a time of the great churning, and that in thinking about your question, Sarah, of talking about what we imagine it might be like in 2050, I mean, we don't know. We know what we hope for, and we hope that our actions will lead to, and that we're curious about whether that happened or not. But that we were part of the movement right now that's really working to turn it around. That's all.
All right. Well, perhaps it's time to move to Grady. And Grady, you had something you were going to read?
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation. And Jill, I haven't had a chance to say this, but it's lovely to meet you. You came highly recommended by your mother, member of our chapter.
I know. Why do you think she cares about climate change?
So I've really been looking forward to this. And I like Helen, I love the project. And for me, writing a letter was really a meaningful experience. And I think it will be for my daughter when she reads it. It'll be sooner than 2030 or 2050 because I've sent it to her, and I think it'll soon float to the top of her list of priorities. But I invited her here tonight, so she's going to listen to the recording. So I wrote a long letter, and I've been invited to read the last 2 paragraphs. In his letter from the Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King wrote, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." There's an analog today. Recent polls show that a solid majority of Americans believe that climate change is real and puts future generations at risk. And a slight majority believes that humans are the problem. Yet few put priority on this issue, and hardly any make their views known to policymakers. In Drew Dellinger's poem, Hieroglyphic Stairway, a great-great-grandchild asks a dreamer, "What did you do when you knew?" In addition to, and more important than all the above, what has inspired me to act is wanting to be able to look you in the eye and say, when I became aware of the existential threat of climate change, I did all I could. Despite my pessimism, I act in the hope that it can make a difference for future generations, for all the precious life on our fragile planet, and in particular, dear Evan, for you.
That's so lovely.
Thank you, Grady.
Thank you.
As we wrap up, are there any other questions or anything else that anyone wants to share tonight?
No, I'll unmute the phones real quick. So if anybody on the phones has anything, you're unmuted now. I think
just thank you for the program.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you guys for your participation. If you have additional questions, I'm open for people sending me an email. You can email me at jill@deartomorrow.org. Or you could bother Jen.
And this was recorded, so you will receive a link to this that you can share with others.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, tomorrow you will receive a link. So if you want to share it with others, and please join the project and share it on your social media, share it in your community, share it with your family and friends. And really, we hope to really help Jill build the elder movement in her project, as well as engage our elders in sharing their stories. So we hope you all participate, and thank you so much for joining tonight's call. Our next call will be the 4th Tuesday in February, which I didn't look at my calendar ahead of time to see the date. But you will find us, we will send you out a call announcement. You will find it in the newsletter also. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for all of your enthusiasm and for your time to participate in this project.
Yeah, thank you, Jill, for taking your time to join us on our national call, and we're really excited to join you on this project.
Yes.
Have a great evening, everybody.
Good evening.